What's up, Change the Channel podcast listeners? My name is Megan Grace, and this is another episode of Change the Channel podcast. Welcome back to the show. First, before we get started, I just wanted to extend a massive thank you to any and all of you that have left a review, have shared my podcast, have told me what words or phrases or insights have landed with you. I don't know if it always is thought about or sometimes goes without saying, but being a podcaster, a lot of times it's me in a room and I'm sharing about things that feel really personal and raw and important. And, I'm fascinated by it. But when you give me that feedback, you let me know how it's landing and you share it with other people that you believe might also benefit from some of these conversations. It just literally feels like putting gas in my tank. When we think about attachment styles, there's anxious attachment and there's avoidant. And I think a lot of times when we as creatives are sharing out in sort of a digital space, it can feel almost a little bit like, is this resonating? Is it landing? And so I just wanted to just deeply, profoundly thank you for the people that are listening literally all over the world. Still kind of shakes me to think about. But if you're hearing my voice in the corners of the globe, it's not an accident. You are a change maker and someone whose mind is open, and your impact, whatever you're moving through to be the individual that you are, is so important. And it's kind of this beautiful thing that we all get to come together and be part of the Change the Channel podcast fam, not necessarily because of orientation, where you live, that kind of thing, but because you have the same mindset. So all that to say, big, long, gushy, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you haven't had a chance to like the podcast, leave a comment or take little bits and pieces and put it out into your social networks, I would just so deeply appreciate it. If there's anything that resonates with you or you have a friend that needs Change the Channel, please invite them in. They are more than welcome. All right. So starting out with a love fest and ending in kind of this beautiful conversation I was having with a friend yesterday. And I'm just going to kind of riff off of what he and I were talking about because this feels really potent and important, and oftentimes is kind of the hard to explain part of being a self-sufficient person that I've noticed it feels like there's a need for some further understanding, and sometimes trying to get the point across can be almost more painful, make you feel more isolated. So that's what this podcast is. This podcast is the opportunity for you to feel seen and understood, and also share it with someone if you're like, I'm going through this right now and I don't actually know how to explain it to you, but I want you to know me. I want to break down some of these barriers between those of us that are moving through the world in a self-sufficient, independent lens, and those in our lives that want to be connected with us. So the story kind of goes, I was talking with my good friend, and he was talking about just his interactions with people in his life and how they would get frustrated with him for not prioritizing spending time or reaching out or whatever. And I think that's actually a really common experience, it's kind of the, why didn't you reach out to me? Why haven't you thought of me? Narrative. And I think more often than not, people are feeling that way, but we don't always know the inner workings of what stops us from reaching out, or what is creating some of the challenge in that connection. So for his situation, and I know my own situation, a lot of times, the reason why some of us don't reach out is because through an embodied experience of life experiences, either ourselves, ancestral, maybe, our ancestors have experienced this. Maybe we've witnessed our parents, our family, our friends, our community, this idea of reaching out and extending a hand of wanting to share part of yourself with someone else and it leading to disappointment. Now, disappointment sounds kind of like a floofy, flowery word that is like, oh, pat, pat on the head, like, sorry you're disappointed, go about it. But sometimes that disappointment can start to erode away at our ability to believe that people do show up at all. And usually, I think with a lot of self-sufficient people, the people that do show up for you tend to show up with a laundry list of requests. And sometimes they're subtle. It's like, hey, I just want to hang out. But really what that means is I want to invite you to something that seems like fun and playful, but instead it's actually, I'm going through something really big and now I need you to be there for me. And I think that it's important for us to be there for each other, but if that person doesn't know what they're walking into or needing, it can lead to disappointment on both sides. The person that needs to be held and heard may get a lackluster response from the person that thought you were just coming to get coffee and hang out. This feeling of disappointment, I also feel like goes back oftentimes to our inner children. I profoundly believe that we are basically the sum total made up of every age we've ever been, all stacked on top of each other, kind of like those stacking dolls. And there can be moments in time where an experience will essentially awaken maybe my 8-year-old self, my 4-year-old self, my 16-year-old self. She usually has a lot to say. High five to her. I can feel her sort of be like, yeah, bitch, I'm that bitch. And I'm glad that she's a part of my life. But I think what ends up happening a lot of times with these interwoven feelings of self-sufficiency is that disappointment intersected your life experience in a profound way when you were a child. And now that can be compounded by the thing that perhaps the person that disappointed you more than anyone else was a parent. And maybe the disappointment wasn't even that they were, abusive in a typical way, but maybe they just didn't see you. Maybe they, saw you as more or less an obstacle in their way to try to get the next thing done that they need to get done. Or maybe you were kind of accidentally in the way and would be receiving the brunt of their frustration. Or maybe they were just absent. Maybe they said they were going to do things over and over again, like, we're going to go to the park, or, this is my last episode of whatever I'm watching, I will listen to you. Or, yeah, honey, I'm listening, but they're really on the phone. Or those send and put subtle imprints on the spirit of a young person and teaches them that this is how the world works. And so as you grow and you're like, okay, you start to cultivate a life that will avoid the feeling of disappointment. And to do that, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, I don't want to feel disappointed, so I'm just going to not do things that bring disappointment. Duh. Why the hell are we having a whole conversation about it? But I think it's sneakier and deeper than that. So it's what ends up happening is there becomes this message that disappointment becomes the new norm. It becomes the baseline. And so a lot of energy goes into avoiding being in that baseline space. So that will show up later in life of, texting a friend and being like, hey, we should hang out. And then you say, yeah, sometime. sure, yeah, we should do that sometime. I don't know about you, but I feel like sometime just never comes because it's not an accident when you end up spending time with someone. It's very intentional and oftentimes takes planning. And so sometime is kind of this open-ended feeling of if I don't actually put down roots on an idea, then I won't be disappointed if it doesn't happen because I didn't really fully claim that it would, or I didn't get my hopes up. And hope is equal parts strong and also delicate. And so, especially if you have come from a childhood that does hold quite a bit of disappointment, or maybe you didn't think it did, but you've grown up and now as an adult, you're looking back and you're like, why is it that I don't go for promotions at work? Why is it that I keep being in partnerships with people that don't actually see me in my glory or push me to be anything bigger or whatever? Why do I feel like I'm always the one reaching out? Why do I feel like people are always reaching out to me in this way that feels like kind of intrusive? And all I want them to know is I just want space. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to keep my head above water. Why can't they just feel me and understand? I feel like all of those, while they sound kind of random and different, all stem from this deep embodied experience of being disappointed and now expecting disappointment from fellow human beings. Now, my friend and I were talking about it more, and he was just like, it was funny because we'd be talking and he goes, but you know what? I'm fine. And his voice would do this thing every time. He'd be like, I'm fine. It would go up. And I'm like, oh no, that is the feeling of putting armor over the soft, squishy parts of our hearts and just say, I don't need anybody because when I need people, that makes me vulnerable. And when I'm vulnerable, bad things happen. And I don't want to deal with that on top of whatever else I'm dealing with. It actually seems like it's just going to be way more work to read anybody in on what I need. So instead of doing any of that, I will just need no one. But what ends up being funny about that is a lot of times the people that have been disappointed so much in their life tend to really know how to show up for people. And in that when you are around other people, it makes a really massive impact. So I want to be around you. Why don't you want to be around me? What's going on? But what that ends up translating through is I need something from you. And it can be really confusing to the person that's receiving that message, because if you've trained the algorithm of your body to believe, number one, that people are disappointing and that you don't need anybody, because you don't want to feel disappointed and let down, then it can come across as almost callous when someone is like, hey, I need to spend time with you. And it almost feels like speaking another language. Like, why do you need to spend time with me? What does that mean? Why are you so bothered by this? Why is it that you don't expect the world to show up as disappointing to the point where you're now disappointed that I'm not showing up? Why don't you just expect that that's the way that it is? And as I was having this conversation with my friend, we were starting to kind of sigh into the awareness that when we have calibrated our life to anticipate and expect disappointment, it's shocking when it doesn't happen and it's numbing when it does happen. But either way, it essentially invites you to keep people at an arm's distance. They may know parts of you, but you only want to share with them the parts that you don't mind if they either misunderstand or don't show up for. The analogy that I use for that is, it's kind of like, you have different kinds of house parties, right? There's the ones that you're like, oh, let's put away all the fine china and put out red Solo cups, because I want to hang out with people, but I don't necessarily trust that they'll handle my things with care. I think they'll just be here for a good time. And so you're like, cool, you get my red Solo cup version. of myself. And then there's other people that you have, like, your grandmother's fine china, that, tea set, and you're like, I actually want to have tea with you, and I want to bring this out, and it feels risky and delicate, and like, okay, like I'm going to tell you about, like my business dream, or I'm going to share with you a new song that I'm working on, or I just wrote a poem, or I want to start a business of my own. Or maybe it's that you want to be a parent and that actually scares the shit out of you. Maybe it's that you want to leave a marriage that you've been in for a really long time. Maybe it's that you have a partner that you're caring for, but you resent them every day. And you feel terrible even saying that. Like, maybe it's that you have this existential fear that you'll never achieve your full potential. Maybe it's that you want to dabble in more of what brings you sexual pleasure, but you've grown up your whole life believing that you're not supposed to care about that stuff. These are fine china comments and topics and essences of the heart and spirit. And there's so many people. I think that all of us have those. We all have the things that matter deeply to us. But oftentimes people, either through not listening as we share what we're talking about, not following up. I call it the sacred follow-up. It's like where someone has just spilled their guts to you in this moment, and then the next day, they're probably having a vulnerability hangover, being like, oh shit, that came out of my face hole. Someone now knows this. I accidentally just put down my fine china and let someone else drink out of it. I wonder what they think of me. And one of the things that we can lovingly help people move through this feeling of embodied disappointment is, when they're in that vulnerability hangover the next day, is to reach out again and say, hey, thanks for sharing that with me. That really mattered a lot, and I feel really honored that you wanted me to know. And it can be really simple, but it's a thing that says, I still see you. It wasn't an accident that we bumped into each other and, we sat down and spilled and drank the tea together. It was like, no, we sat down and had shared a meal and broke bread, and something deeper is here. And so to be a person that, especially people that move through the world with this fear and sense of disappointment, the way that you care for a person that is in that is to be steady, to have some consistency, and also to listen, deeply listen, and listen when they're talking about things. They'll probably brush it under the rug as if it's not that important, or casually pop over it. My friend in the same conversation was getting on me because he was like, babe, you've done 47 podcast episodes and you have had almost 1,000 downloads. Why aren't you shouting that from the rooftops? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's cool. People will listen if they listen. They won't if they won't. It's whatever. But at the end of the day, the downplaying of our good moments oftentimes comes from this deep rooted fear of not being seen, and that leading to disappointment. Dun, dun, dun. And so it's almost like we brush off our genius, we brush off our contribution, we pretend like it doesn't matter that much. And it's almost like a different wound that we give ourselves about our own things. In this world of social media where you post everything from your lunch to the sunsets to business ideas to whatever, there's something beautiful about it, but it also can feel really performative and very sterile and not personal at all for it being social. The media of being social. And I feel like what is so important is, if you have a rare gem person in your life, these are the creatives. These are the people that are wanting to push the envelope forward. Maybe they are musicians or dancers or artists or entrepreneurs or, like, big-hearted, empathic, sensitive, people that are constantly challenging the status quo. All of that is hard to do. And so they've most likely learned that people are not used to seeing things the way that they see things. People have a short attention span and so won't listen to all that they're trying to share. And so, number one, why share it all? And number two, they're going to start telling you the red solo cup version of things that are going on in their life, their safe topics, to sort of gauge whether or not you're present with them and whether it's safe to bring out the fine china. And so the ways you can tell that someone is speaking about their fine china things is if it is a dream, if it's something that they're creating themselves out of like, that it didn't exist before, but it will exist after they make it themselves. If it's matters of the heart or emotion, and if it's matters of things that are deeply intimate. So this can be anything from a business that really matters to you that you want to build that up, to getting married after you've been divorced before and you're scared, but you've decided that you're going to go all in. Like, be aware of those topics. And when someone starts to share with you about them, treat it as if they have brought out their fine china and hold the glass with reverence and ask questions, ask follow-up questions. So with this, it's like, let's say, I'm going to use my friend, for example. He is a musician, and let's say he starts talking about, some new song. It'll probably come across as really casual, like, oh yeah, I was listening to this, and what do you think to it? And what I could do in that moment is say, yeah, it's a song. And that will confirm his, okay, people aren't necessarily listening. I'm best to do this on my own. I'll come out and tell them about this as soon as I'm successful. That keeps the narrative of I avoid disappointment by staying safe and staying by myself. If you want to invite someone to share, and the thing that's so juicy about when you become someone that can sit with and attune yourself to listen to people that are healing the embodied wound of disappointment is you can form and find some of the deepest, most valuable friendships. Because when you're truly seen and this other person knows that they're seen too, it sort of feels like the sky's the limit. And I don't know about you, but I feel like we need more of those relationships. So first you tap in and tune in, is this person casually mentioning something? And then there's two options. A lot of times people will say, yeah, I've heard a song too. That basically says, I didn't hear that this was important to you, so I'm just, I'm skipping to the next topic. And you'll notice that you've done this because that person will sort of shut up and you'll hear nothing more about that song, or nothing more about whatever. They're testing the waters. If you want to invite someone into a conversation, say, oh man, tell me more. Like, oh, like what is it about the song? Or do you want to listen to it now? Or that kind of thing. Because what that does is it says, I'm actually interested in involving myself in your world. I'm interested in listening to what you have to say. Now, this might sound like, duh, Megan, why are we having this conversation? And I will tell you, as someone that is I'm pretty skilled at doing this. This is a big part of who I am. I consistently feel like people don't fully present as ready or able to listen to what I want to talk about. And so and I know that when someone does fully listen and they are with me, they're not necessarily telling me what to do or problem solving or whatever, but they're just with me in my discovery and are celebrating me with it and asking more questions for me to be able to like respond to. What that does for me is it helps solidify something from being a dream in my head to being real. And when you're a creative, holy shit, like what a gift. What a freaking gift to have someone help you move from it just being a swirling dream in your mind to an embodied thing. I've had a friend before too that like she told me, because there was someone that I really cared for deeply and he lived far away, and she looked at me and she was like, I just want you to know that I see what you and this person have and it's real and it matters. And there was something about another person seeing it too that made me be like, oh my God, it is real. It does make sense why this matters to me. Thank you. And it's that feeling of acknowledging and sitting in someone else's world long enough to have an experience with them where it lets them be fully expressed. That is the antidote to this process of disappointment. And I tell you that when you can harness or like hone this skill, when you can become just insatiably curious about the needs of others and the thoughts of others, you will have, after that person's felt really expressed, they're going to have, open throat, open mind, open heart. Don't you want to be around people that are open-hearted and, having their throat open to be able to share and their minds expanded and interested? The conversation and connection that will be had with you will be so much deeper, so much more meaningful. And the likelihood of you having to consistently chase this person and try to get their attention is going to be less. Now, this podcast might also be listened to by people that are insatiably curious and do have this skill and, listen deeply for the fine china moments with your friends. And for that, I just want to say, you are a bright light in a dark world. And it's important for you to be that way because you're essentially going around and putting salve on the wound, this deep wound of disappointment. And that allows people to have an embodied different experience, which will then allow them to change the channel on how they feel about people showing up for them in their life. And to be honest, we are not meant to be independent beings. If you think about it, even from the whole birth process, like human beings are grown one inside of another. We have like an attachment, the umbilical cord that like pours in nutrients and connection. We are the joined forces of two people coming together in some form and creating something new. We are meant to be in community. This idea of all of a sudden your entire birth and being was cultivated with community, and now all of a sudden you pop out and you are meant to just walk the earth as this independent thinker and beer, just doesn't make any fucking sense. It doesn't at all. So we learn to be hyper independent and self-sufficient as a result of trauma and pain and being misunderstood and being disappointed and being let down. Now, I say all of that to say that you are not, quote, independent. You have learned to interact with the world independently. So because you have learned this, you can learn other things too. You can learn to be connected. You can learn to be vulnerable. You can learn to kind of spot the people that are like, when they see that you're getting your fine china down, they're going to also bring their fine china down and have like a real tea party. You'll also notice the people that never go for their fine china in conversations, and you just know that isn't necessarily your practice partner for this work. And a lot of times too, I think that why therapy and coaching is so powerful and potent is because you have essentially, it's like having a personal trainer at the gym that takes your muscles through these reps. It's like, let's try this on again. Let's try this on again. How does it feel to have someone still listening to you? How does it feel to have somebody be curious about what you're curious about? How does it feel to have more than one like brainstorming on your vision? How does it feel to say out loud your ideas and have them not be either talked over, skipped around, or minimized? What does it feel like for someone to say, I'm going to show up for you, and lo and fucking behold, they're actually there when they say they will be? Like, it's these small, subtle things that calibrate and train our brains to what we expect out of others. And so that means that we get to be a stand for what we want to see in the world, for what we want to see in relationships. And if you're starting to notice that you have friends that are keeping some distance from you, or if you are constantly, kind of pinging someone and they're not pinging back, what I would say is, what if you ask them, hey, like, at the heart of me, I want to connect with you. I see how valuable you are. I see how important you are. When I'm around you, I feel really great. And I'm curious, what's going on in your life that I can listen to, that I can hold the topic for with you? And if you don't want to share with me, is there something that I can shift in my ways of being that would make me be someone that would create a bridge for me to be that for you potentially in the future? Because half of the time, we may have actually unintentionally broken an agreement, or, added to this person's feeling of like, well, nobody actually really sees me. And so there could be some, I don't know, like, work that could be done on the relationship. But what I will say is, even if they're not in a place to be able to share and listen, what I would say is, if you start the conversation, if you think about reaching out to whoever that person is, and you reach out to them and you say, number one, I have something exciting to share with you. You can share a fine china version of something that's going on in your life. And then you can ask them, I'm curious, what is your moment like? What is your, what's getting you excited right now? And in your mind, set up with the idea that you are going to be as profoundly curious, open, and expressive, loving, and non-judgmental with whatever they share. So let's say, you finally get to hang out with a friend that you haven't seen in a while, and they're like, oh, you're like, hey, like, I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to telling you about this thing. I just finished working on this project. I feel really good about it. Imagine telling them, a couple things, and then say, I was really excited to tell you about it because I value you so much. I'd love to hear something that's going on in your life, or what's something that I can support that you're working on. And if the person's like, oh, I'm good, I don't really need anything, that's usually a sign that they're used to not having people show up for them, or that they're not 100% sure if you're going to show up for them. So I would say at that point, be like, okay, cool. That makes sense. I do want you to know, though, that I've noticed that you're creative. I've noticed that, you're family oriented. I've noticed, speak to something about either their character or actions you've seen that are profound and meaningful, and say, I'm curious if there's anything about that going on in your life. And let them know first that you see them and that you're interested in listening. And then as soon as they start to say something, you'll notice it'll start small. It's the red Solo cup thing. And sit with them in it. Resist the urge to turn the topic back around to you. And instead just say, my gosh, thank you so much for telling me about that. what has that experience been like for you? Or is this new? Is this common? This is cool. Maybe who else is in on the project, or blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Honestly, if having those dialogues feels tricky, I'll put a link in the show notes for a Change the Channel convo with me, and we can start changing the channel on how you actively listen with people. It's just an exercise in emotional intelligence, practicing holding a topic and container for other people, and how to remove the frequency of judgment, because people can smell it and feel it and see it, even if you're like, I'm here for you. And they're like, no, on what planet? No, thank you. So I'll put that in the show notes, because I actually really believe that stepping into this next iteration of leaders and leadership and thought leaders and people that are changing the channel in their lives, we need to be able to be more attuned with the skill of active listening to help heal some of these wounds around disappointment, isolation, and hyper independentness, because we're going to need each other more than ever coming up. I think it's worked for a while to feel like, I've got me, but I tell you what, when you actually feel seen and held by someone else, it affects you on a cellular level. And that's what we need right now. I don't think we need more of the same, trying, beating our head against a brick wall, trying to solve problems. What we need is to soothe these wounds and learn how to deeply listen to each other, and how to hold a topic well, and to acknowledge if we haven't. And so, yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. I love, love, love to teach that. I believe it's so valuable and important. And it's something that I just have always loved to do. So I'd love to take you on a wild ride through my mindset with that. And all this to say, kind of these hodgepodge topics, hodgepodge experiences, a lot of the Change the Channel things that I feel like I'm going to be doing now is when I notice something being a theme, where I've had more than one conversation about it in a recent time, it feels like it's important to bring up. So if you are managing or moving through the pain and healing of what disappointment has been for you, or if you're feeling the throes of being overly independent, and maybe you're just burnt the fuck out, you're exhausted, you're a strong person, but you also want to savor some parts of the softer life, or maybe you're shout out to the really good men that are out there that are doing the work to become in touch and understand their emotions, and to listen to their partners and their friends and their mothers, as I don't know, I think that a lot of female identified humans are also having this understanding that we need not just to be hardworking badasses, but we are portals to the spiritual realm and the divine. There's weird, wonderful magic that happens inside the body of a person that has a uterus and identifies deeply as a woman that is moving towards being a divine feminine human. And yeah, that's all. I mean, that's stuff for another podcast, but all of that swirling around in my head, and all of that feels big and important and necessary. And to be able to get to any of those higher level things, we, just like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I believe we need to help mend some of these feelings of being the need to be hyper independent, and also soothing and caring for some of the old wounds of disappointment. And another thing that I found really, really helpful with that is sometimes having someone, I do this a lot with my clients, I will be an adult voice in the room, and I will intentionally talk to their inner child. and I will talk to a specific age, and I will say the things that that child deserved to hear at that age. Like when you fell off your bike and someone should have been there to help pick you up, when you like hit a baseball and it hit you and you were hurt and you shouldn't have had to soothe and take care of yourself. Maybe and all of those things are those tiny little tears in the micro fabric of what you understand the world to be. And what we can do that's really powerful is to have a different adult in the room speak to that part of you and begin the dance of reestablishing hope and trust and suppleness and openness on some of those younger levels. So then, when you are making friends as an adult, which is tricky and kind of funny, you don't have an inner 8-year-old that's like, ooh, but watch out. Ooh, I don't know. Ooh, I'm nervous. Ooh, I feel misunderstood. Ooh, blah, blah. Ooh, all of that. Like, we're highly adaptable, incredible humans. And I believe that with the right nurturing and support and understanding and love, just, like basically syrup, just dripping down the side of a thing of pancakes is the way that love needs to be. Like sticky and gooey and overflowing and creating this vastness of sweetness, especially on top of these topics that are so painful. And often brushed under the rug is, nothing more than, a sad child moment. We men need each other. Women need each other. All those that are interacting in, a spectrum of experience of how they feel about their gender and identity. We need each other. We need people that have shared experience, and we also need to support those that have varying other experiences to us. We just need to be more connected. Just deeply, deeply, deeply believe that. So if you, again, are moving through healing some of this stuff, I'll put the link in the show notes. Love, love, love to help with that. And wrapping up this whole podcast, some takeaways are, number one, or some things to journal on, I would say, is what is your relationship with disappointment? What is your first experience remembering what disappointment was? And then how do you see, like, what lesson did you learn from that? And where else in your life does that show up? Start to see what disappointment has bred and led for you, and see if it's helping you or standing in your way of your big dreams, your big juicy goals, the things that you're put uniquely on this planet to bring forward. Because y'all, doing the status quo, spinning our wheels, doing the same shit is getting us the same results. I don't know about you, but I am ready for some new results. So go ahead and get on my calendar with the link in the show notes if you want to talk about this further. If your inner child is needing some nurturing around the feeling of disappointment. And also, this is an invitation to reach out to the friends that maybe you felt a little bit estranged from, but do it from a place not of judgment. Like, why aren't you doing this with me? Say, hey, I'm realizing that your relationship is important to me, and I want to know, because even the best relationship can always grow and expand and change, because we're ever evolving people, growing and expanding and changing. Just do a quick check-in and say, hey, like, what can we do to make this relationship a place where both of us are growing and thriving and feeling heard and listened to and expressed? Of course, use whatever words work best for you, but do a quick check-in, especially if you're feeling agitated or naggy towards anyone in your life. That might be Spirit's way of saying, it's time for a check-in. I am so passionate about this. I am passionate about true active listening, the embodied healing of things around the feelings of disappointment, and to invite people into a feeling of satisfaction and peace and harmony and joy and laughter and playfulness and ease. We are all overdue for a little bit of ease. So reach out to your friends, reach out to your community. And if you're like, dude, I don't have anyone to reach out to, there is a link in the show notes. I'm here. I am open and listening and ready to change this freaking channel with you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being open-hearted and for being who you are. And let me know in the comments if this resonates for you. And I'll also put my Instagram where you can pop a DM and we can start chatting that way. Don't sit by yourself anymore. If you're feeling isolated, this is your loving. It's a love letter inviting you out of the shadows of just sitting with too much of your own self and your own stuff. You're worthy of being held. You're worthy of figuring out what you need to thrive, because you thriving is also an important thing for the whole ecosystem of everyone you're around. You matter deeply. Thank you so much. Thank you for who you are. And thank you for being here for another episode of Change the Channel podcast. Sending blessings to your home, sending blessings to your heart, and I will catch you next time. Much love, y'all.